The most horrific crimes always happen where you least expect them, like on a funeral day, when gunshots took a woman's life in front of her own kids. My name is Oliver Brown. I'm 42 years old, and I've been working as a detective in the homicide division of the Pittsburgh Police Department in Pennsylvania for 15 years. The call came in at 2:37 p.m. I was finishing a report on a previous case when the dispatcher reported a murder on Oak Street. What was strange was that the caller, choking back tears, kept talking about a funeral, a memorial service, and a shooting. That combination did not bode well. I gathered the necessary equipment and drove to the address. On the way, I called James Wilson, my partner. He was at a family dinner but promised to come as soon as he could. It was a cloudy autumn day with a light drizzle, as if nature itself was mourning with the people on this sad day. The Edwards house was a well-kept two-story mansion in a quiet neighborhood. When I pulled up, there were already several patrol cars there, and people dressed in black were gathered in front of the house, participants in the interrupted funeral ceremony. Many were crying, some stood frozen in shock. I noticed a funeral wreath at the entrance. Patrol Officer Jenkins met me at the door. "Detective Brown, the situation is extremely serious. The body is upstairs in the bedroom. A woman, approximately 35 years old, 7 gunshot wounds. Preliminary reports indicate that she is Charlotte Edwards. Her husband was buried today." He spoke dryly, professionally, but I could see that even he, who had seen a lot, was shaken by the situation. The house was full of people, relatives, friends, neighbors. They had all come to say goodbye to Liam Edwards, but instead they witnessed another tragedy. As I climbed the stairs, I couldn't stop thinking that just a week ago this family had been complete, and now 2 children had been left orphaned. The bedroom was at the end of the second-floor hallway. Technicians from the crime lab were already at work, photographing the crime scene. I put on gloves and shoe covers so as not to disturb any evidence. The sharp smell of gunpowder and the metallic taste of blood hit my nose. Charlotte Edwards was lying on the floor near the bed. She was wearing a black mourning dress, now soaked in blood. There were 7 bullet holes in her chest. The killer had shot her at point-blank range. Judging by the initial examination, death was instantaneous. The woman's face was frozen in a look of surprise. She clearly did not expect to see her killer. "Time of death is approximately between 1:30 and 2 p.m., said medical examiner Ray Thompson, who had already examined the body. 7 shots, all close together, in the heart. The shooter was someone who knew how to handle a gun." I looked around the room. There were no signs of a struggle. It looked like Charlotte had let the killer in voluntarily, or that he had taken her by surprise. On the floor next to the body lay a frame with a family photo: Charlotte, Liam, and 2 children, a boy and a girl, about 8 and 6 years old. The glass was broken when the frame fell. "Where are the children now?" I asked Officer Jenkins. "In the children's room with a social worker. They saw everything, Detective." I felt my stomach clench. 15 years in the homicide department, but you never get used to things like this. Children witnessing the murder of their mother on the day of their father's funeral. It was beyond the bounds of normal human cruelty. I decided to start by interviewing those present in the house. It turned out that there were about 30 people gathered on the first floor, close and distant relatives, friends, and colleagues. The funeral service for Liam Edwards was scheduled to begin at 1 p.m., and the body was to be taken to the cemetery at 3 p.m. I set aside a separate room and began to interview everyone present one by one. Strangely, no one noticed anything suspicious. People were talking, expressing their condolences. Some were crying quietly. Around 1 p.m., Charlotte excused herself and went upstairs, saying she needed to change the children's clothes before going to the cemetery. After that, no one saw her. No one heard any shots, which was strange. However, one of the guests, Alan Parker, a friend of the family, mentioned that quiet funeral music was playing in the house, and at some point a garbage truck drove by, which could have drowned out the sound of gunshots. "Did you see anyone suspicious? Did anyone come or leave between 1:30 and 2 p.m.? I asked everyone. The answers were negative. Some guests went out to smoke on the back porch, others went to make phone calls, but no one noticed any strangers. The front door was open for guests, and no one was watching the back door. It was the perfect situation for someone to slip in and out unnoticed. At 4 p.m., James Wilson arrived. After briefly filling him in on the situation, I decided it was time to talk to the children. That's always the hardest part of the job. The children's room was decorated in bright colors, which now contrasted with the gloomy mood of its occupants. 8-year-old Elliot and 6-year-old Zoe sat on the bed, huddled together. Their eyes were red from crying, and their gazes were empty. Social worker Karen Donovan quietly informed me that the children were in shock, but that a doctor had examined them and they were physically fine. I crouched down in front of the children, trying to get down to their level. "Hi, my name is Oliver. I'm a detective, and my job is to find out what happened to your mom. Will you help me?" Zoe sniffed and buried her face in her brother's shoulder. Elliot, despite his young age, was holding himself together. He nodded. "Can you tell me what happened? Who came to see your mom?" Elliot began to speak in a quiet, trembling voice. "We were upstairs with Mom. She was helping Zoe with her dress. Then this woman came." "What woman, Elliot? Do you know her?" The boy shook his head. "No, I've never seen her before. She was wearing dark clothes and was tall. She had these long earrings with shiny stones." "What happened next?" "The woman said she wanted to talk to my mom. My mom was surprised, but she told us to wait in the room. They went out into the hallway and then into my parents' bedroom. Zoe and I were supposed to get dressed, but I could hear them talking loudly." "Did you hear what they were saying?" "The woman was shouting something about Dad, and then Elliot's voice faltered. Zoe suddenly looked up. "Bang, bang, bang. It was loud. I got scared and ran to my mom. Elliot tried to stop me." Elliot hugged his sister. "We went into the bedroom and Mom was lying on the floor. There was blood, lots of blood. The woman was gone." "Did you see where she went?" The children shook their heads. Zoe started crying again, and I realized that was enough for today. I left my business card with the social worker and asked her to contact me if the children remembered anything else. Karen said that the children would be staying with their maternal grandmother, who had come for the funeral. Back in the bedroom, I took another look at the crime scene. The forensic team found 7 9mm shell casings. Judging by the evidence, the gun was probably a Glock or similar weapon. The bullets would be recovered during the autopsy. I noticed fresh scratches on the windowsill. Perhaps the killer had left the house through the window. It faced the side of the house, where there was a small canopy over the first floor, from which it was easy to climb down into the garden and then slip away unnoticed through the back gate. I sent officers to check this route and question the neighbors. By evening, we had gathered the initial evidence. We didn't have much. 7 shell casings and a vague description of the suspect from the children, a tall woman with long earrings. Other than that, we had the suspected escape route through the window. None of the guests recognized such a woman among those present at the funeral. James Wilson reviewed surveillance footage from neighboring houses, but none of them captured the Edwards' backyard. The street footage showed several parked cars and people in mourning clothes entering the house, but no one suspicious. "We don't have many leads, Oliver," James said as we were about to leave. "But there is something strange. I spoke to Alicia, Charlotte's sister. She said that Liam Edwards died suddenly of a heart attack at the age of 40. He had no history of heart problems. She hinted that the couple's relationship had been rocky lately." I nodded, jotting down the information. "Tomorrow we'll need to get Liam Edwards' medical examiner's report, and we need to find out more about his life, his job, his friends, his enemies. Charlotte's murder may be connected to him somehow." In the car, I reviewed my notes once more. The case promised to be complicated. A woman murdered on the day of her husband's funeral. Children as witnesses. No one saw or heard anything. A woman no one knows appears and disappears, leaving behind 7 bullet casings and a family without parents. On the table in the Edwards' bedroom, I noticed a family album open at a photo of a happy family. Liam, Charlotte, Elliot, and Zoe at a picnic last summer. They were smiling at the camera, unaware that in less than a year, their lives would be shattered. I returned home late. Fragments of testimony, the faces of the children, and the image of the mysterious woman with earrings were spinning in my head. Something told me that there was more to this crime than just a random murder. It was personal, and it was my job to find out who this woman was and why she decided to take Charlotte Edwards' life on the most tragic day of her family's life. Tomorrow was going to be a difficult day. I had to start digging deeper into the Edwards family's life. Perhaps the mystery of Liam's death would help solve Charlotte's murder. I felt that the two deaths were somehow connected, although I didn't yet understand how. The morning began with a cup of strong coffee and a stack of documents. James had emailed me everything he could find about the Edwards family. I spread the papers out on the table and began studying the personal lives of the deceased couple. Liam Edwards, 40 years old, worked as a middle manager at the Food Plaza supermarket chain. He was responsible for purchasing and logistics at 10 stores across Pittsburgh. According to his job description, he was a competent employee with no complaints. He had worked for the company for 12 years, starting as a warehouse clerk. Charlotte Edwards, 35, worked as a nurse at a city hospital in Pittsburgh. Her colleagues described her as hardworking and caring. She had been married to Liam for 10 years and had 2 children, Elliot and Zoe. The family's financial situation was stable. They had a small mortgage on their house, which they paid regularly, insurance for both spouses, and their bills were in order. At first glance, they seemed like a normal, happy family. I took a sip of my cold coffee and thought about it. Something didn't add up. Who would want to kill Charlotte and in such a brutal way? And why on the day of her husband's funeral? James arrived at 9 o'clock. He brought the ballistics report and the coroner's preliminary findings. A Glock pistol, 9mm, James said, leafing through the report. 7 shots fired at close range. Death was instantaneous from massive blood loss and heart damage. What about fingerprints, DNA? I asked. Nothing. The killer appears to have been wearing gloves. No prints on the casings, no foreign DNA. I sighed. Our mysterious woman clearly knew how to cover her tracks. What do we have on Liam Edwards' death? I moved on to the next question. James pulled out another folder. He died 6 days ago. The preliminary cause of death was a heart attack. His wife, Charlotte, found him when she came home from her night shift. The paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. The body was sent to the morgue for an autopsy, but since the cause of death appeared to be natural, no investigation was conducted. I tapped my pen thoughtfully on the table. Strange. A 40-year-old man with no previous heart problems dies suddenly, and a week later his wife is murdered. Coincidence? I doubt it. James shook his head. By the way, I've requested a full medical report on Liam's death. It should be ready by this evening. We decided to split up. James went to interview neighbors and relatives, while I drove to Food Plaza, where Liam Edwards had worked. The supermarket chain's headquarters was located in a glass building on the outskirts of town. The human resources director, a heavy-set woman in her 50s named Brenda Collins, met me in a spacious conference room. We are all shocked by what has happened, she began, nervously fingering the beads around her neck. First Liam's death, now this terrible murder. Poor children. I expressed my condolences on behalf of the department and got down to business. Tell me about Liam. What was his relationship with his colleagues? Were there any conflicts? Brenda shook her head. Liam was an excellent employee, responsible, punctual, good with people. In all his years with us, he never had a single complaint. What about his personal life? Do you know anything about that? Brenda visibly tensed. Detective, we try not to get involved in our employees' personal lives. I understand. But we're talking about a double tragedy here. Any information could help us find the killer. She adjusted her glasses and paused for a moment, apparently deciding what she could say. There were rumors, but they're just rumors, you understand? People said that Liam was having an affair with one of the women in accounting. I leaned forward with interest. Who exactly? Harper Bennett. She's been our senior accountant for the last 3 years. They often talked at work, and some people noticed a special chemistry between them. Harper Bennett, I repeated, writing down the name. Is she at work today? Brenda shook her head. No, she hasn't been in touch since the day Liam died. She took time off for family reasons, but her phone isn't answering. We're starting to get worried. A red light went off in my head. A woman who allegedly had an affair with Liam disappears after his death and remains unavailable at the time of his wife's murder? Too many coincidences. I need all the information on Harper Bennett, I said. Personal file, address, next of kin, everything you have. While Brenda gathered the documents, I asked to speak to those who had worked closely with Liam and Harper. I was given a small office where employees were invited in one by one. The first to arrive was Denise Ramos, Liam's assistant. The young woman nervously fiddled with a bracelet on her wrist as she talked about her boss. Mr. Edwards was a good boss, demanding but fair. He always said that family was the most important thing. She faltered. But? I prompted. Over the last year, he often stayed late at work. He said he had a lot of projects, but there was no real need. And I saw him several times with Miss Bennett at the cafe across from the office. They were sitting very close together and, well, it didn't look like a business meeting. Next was Kevin Turner, Liam's colleague, also a purchasing manager. Liam has changed in recent months, he said after the standard questions. He became distracted and checked his phone frequently. Once I walked into his office without knocking and saw him quickly close some photos on his screen. He looked very embarrassed. A picture gradually emerged. Almost everyone interviewed confirmed that there was a special relationship between Liam Edwards and Harper Bennett. They tried to be careful, but little goes unnoticed in an office. I received Harper Bennett's personal file. 38 years old, unmarried, no children. She had worked at Food Plaza for 3 years, transferring from the Philadelphia branch. Her address was an apartment in a high-rise building near the city center. Leaving the office, I called James and asked him to check the address. He replied that he had already sent patrol officers there, but Harper was not at home, and her neighbors had not seen her for the past few days. I decided to check Harper's apartment myself. Maybe I'd find some clues there. On the way, I thought about the motive. If Harper was really Liam's mistress, she might have had a reason to hate his wife. But why wait until the day of the funeral? And why such brutality? 7 shots at point-blank range. The high-rise where Harper lived turned out to be a typical middle-class residential complex. The concierge confirmed that he hadn't seen Miss Bennett for several days. With the manager's permission and the warrant James had managed to obtain, I went up to her apartment on the 9th floor. The apartment was neat but bland, as if it had been taken from a furniture catalog. There were few personal belongings and almost no photographs. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable. I methodically searched room after room. In the bedroom, on the bedside table, was the only framed photograph. Harper with an elderly woman, probably her mother. In the drawer of the bedside table, I found several flyers for medical clinics specializing in the treatment of cardiovascular disease. A strange find for a healthy 38-year-old woman. In the living room behind the sofa, I noticed a small safe. It was closed, but not locked. Inside were several documents, a set of keys, and a well-worn leather-bound notebook. I put on gloves and carefully opened it. It turned out to be Harper's personal diary. The last entries were dated last week, just before Liam's death. I started reading, and with each page my concern grew. L talked about divorce again. He says he loves me and wants to be with me, but he needs time to sort things out with S. I've been waiting for over a year. How long can this go on? Today, L said he told S about us. She supposedly threw a fit and threatened to take the kids away. I don't believe it. She's too cold-hearted for that kind of emotion. The entries became increasingly disturbing. L wasn't feeling well today. He says that after dinner with she, he started feeling nauseous and dizzy. I suggested he see a doctor, but he refused. He says it's just stress, but I can see that he's pale and his hands are shaking. The symptoms returned after dinner at home. Coincidence? I don't think so. I'm starting to suspect that she is putting something in his food. She's a nurse. She has access to various medications. I have to warn L somehow. The last entry was made on the day of Liam's death. L canceled our meeting. He said that she insisted on a family dinner. I begged him not to go, but he just laughed at my fears. He said I was paranoid and that Charlotte wasn't capable of such a thing. He doesn't understand what a woman who is afraid of losing everything is capable of. I'm going to call him every hour to make sure he's okay. I closed the diary, feeling a chill run down my spine. If these entries were to be believed, Harper was convinced that Charlotte was slowly poisoning Liam, and judging by all appearances, her worst fears had been confirmed. Liam died that evening. The safe also contained a printout of an article about the symptoms of poisoning by various substances. Some paragraphs were underlined, those describing substances that could cause a heart attack without leaving any obvious traces. I photographed all the documents I found in the diary, then called James. We need to check if Charlotte Edwards worked in a department with access to powerful drugs, I said, summarizing my findings. I'm already on it, James replied. And there's news on the medical report on Liam's death. The pathologist found some oddities in the tests, but couldn't identify a specific substance. He says further tests are needed. Get a permit for an exhumation, I decided. We need to know for sure whether Liam's death was natural. After examining Harper's apartment, I headed to the hospital where Charlotte Edwards worked. The head of the department, Dr. Patricia Green, greeted me warily. Charlotte was one of our best nurses, she said when I started asking questions. I don't believe she could have been involved in anything illegal. Did she have access to any drugs that could have caused a heart attack? I asked bluntly. Dr. Green frowned. Theoretically, yes. Charlotte worked in the cardiology department, but we keep strict records of all medications, especially the powerful ones. Any discrepancies would have been noticed. Could she have circumvented the system somehow? It would be difficult, but it's possible, the doctor admitted reluctantly. An experienced medical professional knows the loopholes in the system, but that's all speculation. Do you have any concrete evidence against Charlotte? I shook my head. So far, there were only suspicions based on Harper's diary entries. Not enough for charges, especially against a dead woman, but enough to dig deeper. As I left the hospital, I received a message from James. He sent me a photo he had found on Liam Edwards' computer. It showed Liam hugging Harper with a lake in the background. They looked happy and in love. The photo had been taken just 2 months ago. Now we had a clear connection between Liam and Harper. They were definitely in a romantic relationship. And Harper had a motive to hate Charlotte. She saw her as an obstacle to her and Liam's happiness. But had that hatred turned into a desire to kill? At 4 p.m., James and I met at the station to summarize the information we had gathered. So what do we have? I began, laying out the photos and documents on the board. Liam Edwards, 40 years old, dies of a suspected heart attack. He was having an affair with Harper Bennett, who suspected that Liam's wife, Charlotte, was slowly poisoning him. 6 days after Liam's death during his funeral, someone kills Charlotte, James continued. 7 shots at point-blank range in front of her children. The children described the killer as an unknown woman with long earrings. Harper Bennett disappeared immediately after Liam's death and remained missing at the time of Charlotte's murder, I added. Her motive is obvious: revenge for her beloved, whom she was convinced had been poisoned by his wife. James tapped his pencil thoughtfully on the table. Everything points to Harper as Charlotte's killer. But was Liam really poisoned? Or is this all the product of a jealous lover's imagination? That's why we need the results of the additional tests, I nodded. If Liam was indeed poisoned, it would give us even more reason to consider Harper the prime suspect in Charlotte's murder. And if not, if Liam's death was natural, then it's a terrible twist of fate, I sighed. Harper killed an innocent woman because of her false suspicions, and the children were left orphaned because of her mistake. We sent out a description of Harper Bennett to all police stations and border crossings. Her photo from her personal file wasn't very clear, but it was better than nothing. The 3rd day of the investigation began with an early phone call. At 6 in the morning, I was awakened by a phone call from Dr. Ray Thompson from the medical examiner's office. Detective Brown? Sorry to call you so early, but I thought you should know this as soon as possible. We've received the preliminary toxicology results from the exhumation of Liam Edwards' body. I was wide awake and fumbled for my notebook and pen on the nightstand. What's the news, Doc? At first glance, everything points to a heart attack, as we initially suspected, but we found traces of a substance that could have triggered it. There are traces of digoxin in the blood and tissues at concentrations several times higher than the therapeutic dose. I wrote down the name of the drug. Digoxin? What is that? A cardiac glycoside used to treat heart failure. In therapeutic doses, it helps the heart work harder, but an overdose can cause arrhythmia and cardiac arrest. The symptoms of an overdose often resemble a normal heart attack, especially if the patient has no history of taking this drug. In such cases, the emergency doctor may not suspect poisoning. And this drug could have been available to Charlotte Edwards as a nurse in the cardiology department? Definitely. Digoxin is widely used in cardiology. A nurse with Charlotte's experience would have known all about its effects and potential risks. I thanked the doctor and promised to stop by later for the full report. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, processing the information. It seemed that Harper Bennett's suspicions weren't completely paranoid. There was enough reason to believe that Liam Edwards didn't die of natural causes, but proving it was pointless now. Charlotte, the suspect in his murder, was also dead. Our priority remained the same: find Harper Bennett. I called James, told him about the test results, and arranged to meet him at the station in an hour. At 7:30, we were already working on a plan of action. Our main assumption was confirmed. Harper Bennett was most likely the woman who shot Charlotte Edwards, driven by a desire to avenge the death of her lover. "Where do you think she might have gone?" asked the police chief, who had joined the meeting given the seriousness of the case. I thought for a moment. Her mother was mentioned several times in the diary. Perhaps she was trying to contact her or even hide at her place. James nodded. I checked. Harper's mother, Gloria Bennett, lives in the small town of Greenfield, about 2 hours' drive from here. We've already contacted the local police department, and they're looking into it. "What else do we have?" asked the chief. "CCTV footage confirms that a car matching the Bennetts was seen near the Edwards house on the day of the murder. We're currently checking all the cameras along the route from the Edwards house to the city limits." Before we could finish the meeting, we received a call from the Greenfield police. The officer reported that Gloria Bennett categorically denied having had any contact with her daughter in the past week. Moreover, she herself was concerned about her disappearance. "But there is one lead," the officer added. "The Bennetts have a small hunting lodge on Lake Windermere, about 15 miles from the city. Gloria says Harper often went there when she needed to be alone. The lodge is isolated, with the nearest neighbors a mile away." It sounded promising. The perfect place to hide and wait for the fuss over the murder to die down. We immediately organized a capture team and set out for Greenfield. The local police agreed to meet us and escort us to the hunting lodge. The drive took almost 3 hours. The autumn forest greeted us with a riot of colors: bright red maples, golden birches, bronze oaks. In a different situation, I would have enjoyed the beauty, but now all my thoughts were focused on the upcoming arrest. The last few miles to the lodge were on a dirt road. Finally, a small wooden structure appeared among the trees. In front of it stood a silver Toyota Camry, the same car we had seen on the surveillance footage. Harper was here. We surrounded the house, trying to be as quiet as possible. I took the megaphone. "Harper Bennett, this is Detective Oliver Brown of the Pittsburgh Police Department. The house is surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Nothing happened for several long minutes. Then the door slowly opened, and a woman appeared in the doorway. Tall, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, she was dressed in simple jeans and a sweater. Long silver earrings glinted in her ears, the same ones the Edwards children remembered. "I'm not armed," she said calmly, raising her hands. Her voice sounded tired, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time and was almost relieved to have it. I approached her, keeping my hand on my holster. "Harper Bennett, you're under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Charlotte Edwards." After reading her rights, I handcuffed her. She didn't resist. Inside, the cottage was modestly furnished. Embers were burning in the fireplace, and there was a half-finished cup of coffee on the table. An open travel bag with clothes lay on the bed, and next to it was a photograph of Harper and Liam, the same one we had found on his computer. James looked around the cottage while I escorted Harper to the police car. "Detective?" he called to me after a couple of minutes, standing at a small desk. "I think you should see this." On the desk was a letter written in neat handwriting. It began with the words, "To whom it may concern." It was a confession. Harper described in detail her relationship with Liam, her suspicions that Charlotte was slowly poisoning him, and finally, the moment when she decided to take revenge. "I couldn't let her get away with it," Harper wrote. "Liam deserved justice. I know the law will never prove she killed him. She was too smart, too careful. But I know the truth. I saw him fade away. I felt like I was losing him every day." And she kept smiling, playing the role of the caring wife, knowing she was slowly killing him. I took a photo of the letter, and we took it as evidence. In the car, Harper sat silently, staring out the window at the autumn landscape rushing by. It wasn't until we got onto the main road that she finally spoke. "You already know, don't you, about what she did to Liam?" I looked at her in the rearview mirror. "We found traces of digoxin in his system." Harper nodded, as if confirming what she had never doubted. "I tried to warn him. I told him she was dangerous. But he didn't believe me. He thought I was just jealous. And I was jealous, but that wasn't why I was worried. I saw changes in him. At first it was minor, fatigue, dizziness. Then it got worse, chest pains, irregular heartbeat. He blamed it on stress and age. But I just knew something was wrong." "Why did you decide to act on the day of the funeral?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I wanted her to know what he was dying for, to understand who Liam really was," Harper said quietly. "And also, I wanted to wait for definitive confirmation of my suspicions. The night after he died, I snuck into their house while she was at the hospital with the kids. I searched her things and found a pill bottle in her jewelry case. The label said, digoxin. That's when I knew I'd been right all along." We drove the rest of the way to Pittsburgh in silence. I pondered her words. If Harper had indeed found digoxin among Charlotte's belongings, it was serious evidence. But why hadn't she gone to the police? Why had she decided to take justice into her own hands? At the police station, Harper was officially questioned in the presence of a lawyer. She fully admitted her guilt in the murder of Charlotte Edwards, confirming every detail. How she had entered the house through the back door during the commotion of the funeral. How she had gone upstairs, knowing that Charlotte would be there with the children. How she demanded to talk to her alone. "I wanted her to confess," Harper said. "I wanted to hear her admit that she killed Liam, but she denied everything. She looked at me with such bewilderment, as if she didn't understand what I was talking about. And that drove me crazy. I took out the gun. I just wanted to scare her, to make her tell the truth. But when she kept denying it, something inside me snapped. I don't remember pulling the trigger the first time. And then I couldn't stop." "Where did you get the gun?" I asked. "The gun belonged to my father. He taught me how to shoot when I was a teenager. After he died, I kept the gun." "Did you realize the children might see it?" A shadow of pain crossed her face. "No, I thought they were in another room. When I heard them screaming, it was horrible. I ran down the hall and climbed down the drain pipe. I never wanted to hurt the children. They didn't do anything wrong." After the interview, I returned to my office to finish my report. James brought me coffee and tossed a folder on the desk. "Full toxicology report on Liam Edwards," he said. "Just got it." I opened the folder and began to read. With every line, my heart sank a little more. Dr. Thompson had conducted additional, more detailed tests, and the results were clear. Although traces of digoxin were indeed found in Liam's system, the concentration was not lethal. What's more, the pathologist had discovered a congenital heart defect, a condition that often goes unnoticed until a fatal attack. "Damn it," I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. "Liam Edwards died of natural causes. He had a congenital heart defect that he may not have even been aware of. But what about the digoxin?" James asked. I flipped through the pages of the report. It appears he was taking it in therapeutic doses. He may have had symptoms of heart failure, and his doctor prescribed it for him. Or Charlotte, as a nurse, noticed signs of heart problems and insisted that he take the medication, James finished for me. She wasn't trying to poison him, she was trying to help. And Harper, seeing his condition deteriorate, decided that his wife was to blame, I added. A tragic misunderstanding. We paused, contemplating the irony of the situation. The woman Harper had killed in revenge for Liam's alleged poisoning may have actually been trying to save his life. I had another difficult conversation ahead of me, telling Harper that her suspicions were wrong. I found her in the holding cell. She was sitting on the cot with her arms wrapped around her knees, looking much older than her 38 years. "Miss Bennett, I have news," I began, sitting down across from her. "We've received the full toxicology report on Liam's body." She looked up at me with tired eyes. "And?" "Liam died of natural causes. He had a congenital heart defect. The digoxin in his system was at a therapeutic dose, not enough to cause death. Most likely he was taking it as prescribed by his doctor or..." On Charlotte's advice, who, as a nurse, might have noticed symptoms of heart failure. I saw the life drain from her eyes with every word I said. She turned pale and began to shake her head frantically. No, that's impossible. I found the pills in her things. She must have... The pills may have belonged to her, I said gently, but not to poison Liam, to help him. Charlotte was a nurse in the cardiac ward. She could recognize the signs of heart disease and was trying to help her husband, even if he refused to see a doctor. Harper covered her face with her hands, and her shoulders shook with sobs. What have I done? God, what have I done? I looked at her silently, unable to find words of comfort. What can you say to someone who has just realized that they killed an innocent person based on false suspicions? The children, she said suddenly, raising her tear-stained face. What will happen to Liam's children? They're being taken care of by their grandmother, Charlotte's mother. They're safe. I ruined their lives. I took both their parents away from them because of my blind jealousy and suspicion. They'll never forgive me. I'll never forgive myself. I didn't argue with her. Nothing could change the fact that 2 children had been orphaned because of a tragic chain of events and false assumptions. When I left the cell, James was waiting for me in the hallway. How is she? Devastated, I replied. She realizes she killed an innocent man and ruined the lives of 2 children. A classic tragedy, James sighed. Blind love, jealousy, revenge, all because of a misunderstanding. I nodded. The worst thing is that her logic made sense. Liam's symptoms could have been consistent with slow poisoning, and the pills she found only confirmed her suspicions. She built a whole theory and believed in it so deeply that she couldn't accept any other explanation. Will she get a first-degree murder sentence? Her lawyer will probably argue for second-degree murder, given her emotional state and her belief that she was avenging the murder of a loved one. But either way, she's looking at a long prison sentence. We returned to the office to finish up the paperwork. The case was practically solved, but a bitter aftertaste remained. No one won in this story. Liam died of an illness that could have been treated if he had seen a doctor in time. Charlotte was killed because of false suspicions. Harper lost her loved one and her freedom, and 2 children were left orphaned.